Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you my own experiences trying to answer the question that I have been asked by a number of people, and that is if the new Tamron 35-150mm F2 to F2.8 is a good travel lens. Now, part of this is because Tamron does market it somewhat as such. And my conclusions more in my review series of it is that this is a genuinely excellent lens, and I considered it to be more of a supreme event type lens. You know, it borrows the meat of the 24 to 70 millimeter and 70 to 200 millimeter focal ranges and packs them into one lens, and adds the benefit of that, larger than average maximum aperture, at least on the wide end of f2, and it only ends up at f2.8 where those lenses begin. And so as a byproduct of that, I knew it was a great lens, but I wanted to answer the question for myself whether or not it was a great lens for travel purposes. And so I recently took this as my primary lens on a trip to Arizona, where I was able to see some of my family that I hadn't seen for 3 years, and also do a variety of different activities as a part of my time there. So understand as I enter into this that my experiences are my experiences, and I'm going to try to give you some information and show you some pictures that might help to answer the question, but ultimately you're going to have to answer that question for yourself. Everyone has different tolerances when it comes to carrying weight, and that really is kind of the principal question here. This is not a small lens, it's not a light lens, and so is it worth carrying that extra size and weight to achieve what you can do with this lens? That's what I want to try to answer here today. And so I recognize people have different tolerances for weight. I hear sometimes people complain about the weight of a certain lens that I consider to be relatively lightweight. And transversely, if you're someone who regularly packs out a 400 millimeter f2.8, well, you're going to find a lens like this probably be pretty lightweight. So as I said, your experience may vary from mine. Today's episode is brought to you by Phantom Wallet, the minimalist, modern wallet that sets you free from a bulky traditional wallet while also making it easy to access your cards and money when you need them, thanks to their unique fanning mechanism. Visit phantomwallet.com to check out their unique sizes, styles, and finishes that span from aluminum to wood to carbon fiber. You can even customize your wallet with new accessories like a money clip, cash holder, ID display, and even the Chipolo tracking integration if you're the kind of person who loses their wallet. Use code DUSTIN15 for 15% off when you're ready to check out. So one of the things that I love to do when I'm in Arizona is to go out hiking on the various trail systems that are there into the foothills around the Phoenix area, particularly around Scottsdale and Fountain Hills is the place where I did my hikes. So I did about a half dozen 4 to 6 kilometer hikes, and so I carried the lens on a Sony Alpha 1. And I use this Peak Design slide light strap. And so I carry that. When I carry this, I carry it in what you would call a sling position. So across one shoulder and down under, back across my chest like that. So what I found is that, somewhere in the hike, I would start to feel, some pressure on that trapezius muscle there. And so what I would do is I just switch around to the other side. Between those two things, I never had to do that more than once during any of those hikes. And for myself, I felt comfortable with that. And obviously, as far as a carry solution, I did travel. I traveled with this in my carry-on bag. This is a cube. So I had that set up here, and then I brought a couple of other lenses along. One of which I would just happen to be testing. The other was the Samyang 24mm f1.8, a really lightweight lens that has that wider angle of view that I thought complemented this lens nicely. And it's a lens that I also really like as well. So as a byproduct of that, I was really happy with the kit for travel. So as far as the actual convenience of carrying this, there are smaller and lighter options. And one of those, really excellent ones I find is Tamron's own 28 to 200 millimeter that is also, designed for Sony FE. And so it's a great alternative, but there are a couple of areas that I want to highlight through photos and through observations to where this might be for some people a better choice. So it does add some versatility because of that larger maximum aperture for the kind of things that you can do. Now, one of those things that I did a lot of, I've got basically 4 different baskets that the photos and the purposes of this trip fell into. The first of those is just, being around family. And so that would include, candid moments. I hadn't seen my family in 3 years, as I mentioned. And so it was just, being together for the holidays. It was, capturing the people that I care about in those candid situations, just to kind of remember those moments. So I don't think that you couldn't do that with another lens, but of course the advantage when you have a larger maximum aperture lens is you can do a little bit more of a subject isolation and play with depth of field a little bit more. And you'll notice in some of these shots, I've certainly done that to where I've put other things out of focus to highlight, just a person that's talking, just the person that I wanted to feature as a part of the photo. And so obviously it made for a very useful lens for that kind of thing, a useful focal length, but also a useful maximum aperture. The second area, however, kind of the second basket here, is that I went with my children and then some of my nieces and nephews and others to a trampoline park. And there, I wanted to capture the kids doing kid things. And so that meant that if I needed to stop action, for example, for this series of flips, it means that I was shooting even at f2.8. I was shooting at ISO 12,800 to be able to stop action appropriately. So first of all, you'll note, number one, that the lens did a great job of focusing under those conditions. So that in itself, of course, is very useful. But a standard travel lens at the focal length that I was shooting at would probably give you something more like an f5.6 aperture. So if you do the math, if I was already shooting at ISO 12,800 to stop action, it means that I would have had to jack things all the way up to ISO 52,800 at f5.6, which meant that the photos wouldn't be nearly as useful or as clean looking, even on very good modern cameras. And so I would say for that particular application, this lens was able to do something that a standard type travel lens just wouldn't do. So that might be worth something to you. Another thing that I did as a part of this was to take landscapes. Obviously, when I'm going out hiking, the whole reason I'm carrying this is to, capture the beauty of the Sonoran Desert and, in a different kind of environment than what I typically shoot at here in Eastern Canada. And so, byproduct of that is that my only downside, I would say, is the same kind of flaw that I picked up on previously. And that is that the lens is somewhat flare prone. So it's not as good as some of the dedicated wide angle lenses that I've used for those grander scenes. At the same time, however, it does add the versatility of being able to switch between isolating elements, zooming in and maybe, highlighting cacti or the light coming through needles on these cholla, or, and then of course going wider and capturing the big scenes. And as long as that flare is not an issue, this lens does a beautiful job. It captures really great color, great contrast, and of course it's an incredibly sharp lens. And so at landscape apertures, the details even on a 50 megapixel sensor really pop. And so that's one element where I would say it's probably average. If you weigh out all of those things compared to other travel options, I would say that it's only average. However, you do get a little bit of an advantage again in isolating subjects, the fact that you can shoot with a wider maximum aperture. The final basket that my photography work fell into is that whenever I am there, of course, my family has opportunity to have me around and to get pictures out of me. And so always they want to do family type photos. So a byproduct of that is that I was able to use this lens as the primary option for shooting photos either of a larger group or individual families or of individuals. And so obviously this is a beautiful portrait option. It has that great versatility of focal length. It also has, of course, the wide maximum aperture that gives you a more professional type look. And of course, my daughter ended up featuring, as she always does, because she really likes. Some of you wonder if she likes to model for me. The answer is yes. And so some of these photos were by her request. But a byproduct of that is that I was able to get some really amazing natural available light. I wasn't traveling with lighting, so I was traveling fairly lightweight. And so, byproducts, I was able to get some really amazing photos just using the available light there. And so, I would say that at least two of these categories, when you talk about stopping action and as a portrait option, you simply are able to get photos that you just, I don't think typically could get, or at least to the same kind of level with a typical travel type option. And I think even for some of my family Candids, the versatility of not having to jack up the ISO, being able to isolate your subject a little bit more, made these photos just a touch more special than what they would with a standard lens. And so at the end of the day, I will say this: not every travel trip is the same. You don't always have the same kind of priorities. And maybe if you're going to be walking around all day long and just taking photos of the sights, this lens is not going to be a great option. However, if you're traveling in a situation where you're going to shoot a variety of things and you value having a more professional end product, either for a client or for your own use, then I would say that yes, this Tamron 35-150 is a very intriguing travel option because of that flexible focal range, but even more importantly, that maximum aperture that just allows you to do a lot of different types of photography and to do them effectively in one package. And so if you are considering this maybe as a travel lens, or as travel being a part of the portfolio of what you want to do with it, it remains to me one of the most intriguing lenses I've seen in recent years because it just does so many things so very well. I'm Dustin Abbott, and if you look in the description down below, I will throw linkage to my original text review of the lens, but I'll also throw linkage to a new image gallery that features the photos that you've seen as a part of this review if you want to check them out more thoroughly. Beyond that, there are some buying links if you want to purchase one for yourself. Also linkage there to follow myself or Craig on social media, to become a patron, to purchase merchandise, and of course, if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Be sure to ring that bell so you get notifications when new content drops. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and let the light in.